There is a specific kind of silence in the house at 5:30 in the morning. It is before the traffic starts out on the main road, before the Arizona sun really starts baking the pavement, and before the demands of the day begin to pull at you. For most of my life, the ritual of making that first pot of black coffee was the most peaceful 15 minutes of my day. You listen to the water bubbling through the machine, you feel the warmth of the ceramic mug in your hands, and you just breathe. But if you are someone who has been told to watch your blood sugar, that morning peace gets completely shattered by a tiny plastic device sitting next to the sugar bowl. You prick your finger, you watch the little countdown on the screen, and you wait to see what kind of day you are going to have. For a long time, nothing frustrated me more than my morning numbers. It is a very specific kind of defeat. You spend the entire previous day doing everything exactly right. You eat a sensible dinner, you skip the heavy carbohydrates, you take a walk in the evening, and you go to bed feeling like you have done your job. Then you wake up 12 hours later, having not eaten a single crumb of food all night, and your blood sugar is sitting at a number that makes absolutely no sense. It feels like a betrayal. It feels like your body is playing a cruel joke on you in the dark while you are sleeping. I spent the best years of my working life in community health education. I stood in damp community center basements and public libraries, looking at rooms full of hard-working people, trying to translate dense medical textbooks into language they could actually use. I knew the textbook explanation for why this happens. The medical community calls it the dawn phenomenon. It is your liver deciding to dump a massive dose of stored glucose into your bloodstream right before you wake up, like an engine revving up for the day. I knew the mechanics of it perfectly well, but knowing exactly how the plumbing works does not make you feel any less angry when the pipes burst in your own house. My father was a man who worked with his hands his entire life in a manufacturing plant in Columbus, Ohio. He understood machines, but he treated his own body like it belonged to the company. He completely ignored the warning signs his system was giving him until the damage was structural and irreversible. He would have looked at that morning blood sugar reading, grumbled about it, and gone off to work without changing a thing. I watched him pay a terrible price for that kind of stubbornness, and I promised myself I would not inherit his blindness to the dashboard warning lights. But staring at that meter every morning, I felt entirely helpless. I was explaining this exact frustration to my son Daniel during one of his visits. Daniel is a physical therapist up in Denver, and he spends his days working with older folks whose bodies are throwing up roadblocks. We were sitting on my back porch watching the shadows get long, and I told him that managing my sugar felt like trying to drive a heavy truck with a slipping transmission. I was pressing the gas pedal by eating right, the engine was roaring, but the gears were just not catching. The effort was not translating to the road. Daniel listened to me, and then he shifted my entire perspective on what was actually happening inside my veins. He told me I was completely obsessed with the amount of sugar floating in the blood, but I was entirely ignoring the doors that the sugar needed to walk through. He told me to imagine the millions of cells in my muscle tissue as tiny little houses. Every single house has a heavy metal padlock on the front door. The insulin your body produces is the key to those padlocks. When the key turns, the door opens, the sugar leaves your bloodstream, goes into the house, and gets burned as energy. But as we get older, and as we accumulate decades of wear and tear, inflammation, and stress, those cellular padlocks get incredibly rusty. It does not matter if your pancreas is pumping out plenty of insulin. It does not matter how many keys you have if the lock itself is completely seized up with rust. The key just scrapes against the metal, the door stays firmly shut, and the sugar stays trapped outside in the streets of your bloodstream, causing damage to the neighborhood. That morning dump of sugar from my liver was hitting a completely closed system. My body was making the keys, but the locks simply were not turning. Hearing it explained that way changed everything. I realized I did not necessarily need to fight the morning sugar directly. I needed to find a way to clean the rust off my cellular padlocks. I needed a biological penetrating oil. I went back into the medical journals and the research databases I used to use for my community classes. I was not looking for a miracle pill, because miracles do not exist when it comes to human biology. I was looking for a mechanical advantage. I was looking for something that acted directly on insulin sensitivity at the cellular level. That is when I found myself reading study after study about a spice that most of us only ever think about during holiday baking: cinnamon. At first, I completely dismissed it. It sounded exactly like the kind of old wives' tale you hear passed around in the grocery store checkout line. But when you look at the actual clinical mechanisms, it is not magic at all. It is pure chemistry. Certain active compounds in cinnamon act almost exactly like a chemical solvent on those rusty locks. When those compounds enter your bloodstream, they physically bind to the insulin receptors on the outside of your cells. They change the environment of the receptor, clearing away the biological interference and making the lock responsive to the insulin key once again. It essentially lubricates the mechanism so the doors can swing open easily when the morning sugar hits. But there is a massive catch to this, a sub-layer of information that almost nobody talks about, and it is the difference between helping your body and actively damaging your liver. If you walk into your local supermarket and grab the cheapest, biggest plastic bottle of cinnamon off the baking shelf, you are buying cassia cinnamon. It is mass-produced, it is cheap, and it contains high levels of a compound called coumarin. If you ingest high amounts of coumarin every single day as a health habit, it can become toxic to your liver. You would be trying to fix a rusty lock by pouring acid on the hinges. The cinnamon that contains the cellular penetrating oil without the dangerous levels of coumarin is called Ceylon cinnamon. It is often labeled as true cinnamon. You will probably not find it at the corner store. You have to look for it at a specialty grocer or order it, and it will cost you a few dollars more. It looks a little lighter in color, and it has a much milder, sweeter smell, almost like a faint perfume rather than a sharp, aggressive spice. But it is the only variation you should be putting into your body on a daily basis. I did not want to add another complicated medical routine to my morning. After 60, if a habit feels like a chore, you are simply not going to keep doing it. The body thrives on consistency, not complexity. So, I tied this new mechanical fix directly to the one routine I never skip under any circumstances: my morning coffee. Every single morning, before I even turn the coffee maker on, I take exactly half a teaspoon of ground Ceylon cinnamon and I put it straight into the paper filter, resting right on top of my dark roast coffee grounds. The hot water brews right through the spice, pulling those active compounds directly into the liquid. It cuts the bitterness of the black coffee beautifully, but more importantly, it delivers that biological penetrating oil into my system first thing in the morning, right as my liver is waking up and dumping that stored glucose. I am lubricating the locks before the heavy traffic even hits the streets. It was not an overnight fix, but after about 3 weeks of this quiet, simple habit, I started to see the shift. The numbers on that plastic meter started to smooth out. The sharp, aggressive mountain peak of blood sugar that used to ruin my mood before 6 in the morning started turning into a gentle, rolling hill. My energy felt solid and anchored without that sudden mid-morning crash that tells you your system is fighting a losing battle. We spend so much time looking for massive, dramatic interventions when our health starts to slip. We look for the newest extreme diet or the most complicated exercise routine. But your independence is not usually saved by massive interventions. It is protected in the small, unglamorous habits. It is protected by understanding exactly how your own engine works and simply giving it the right oil. What you ignore today can limit you tomorrow, but the opposite is also true. What you fix today gives you freedom tomorrow. Do not let the frustration of a bad morning number convince you that the fight is over or that your body is completely broken. You are not a passenger in this process. You still have the tools to change the environment inside your veins. The independence you want to hold on to for the next 10 or 20 years is being decided right now, in your kitchen before the sun even comes up. You still have plenty of time to make the right adjustments. Take care of your foundation, take care of yourself, and I will see you next time.